The Akedat Yitzchak, plays a very, very large role in the Rosh HaShana liturgy and the themes that play in and out of Rosh HaShana, that weave themselves into the fabric of what Rosh HaShana is all about. We blow a ram's horn because we know, according to tradition and according to the psukim themselves, that the surrogate for Avrahams' son Yitzchak on the altar was a ram. So our tradition is that part of the reason why we blow a ram's horn is to remind Hashem of the Akedah, and in the merit of Akedat Yitzchak, where our patriarch was willing to sacrifice his own son and the future of the Jewish people for the sake of God, we are prepared, or we commit ourselves in the same way, and Hashem should look down upon that mercifully and give us a goodly judgment for the new year. The imagery of the ram, though, is something that's fascinated me for a while. The Torah says that after God stays Avrahams' hand and says, do not kill your son, the Torah then says, Vayisa Avraham et einav. Avram lifted up his eyes, Vayar v'hinei ayil, and he looked, and behold, there's a ram. Achar ne'echaz basavach bekarnav. In the back, tangled in the brush with its horns. Vayelech Avraham vayikach et ha'ayil. So Avram went, and he took the ram. Vaya'aleo le'olah tachat beno. And he brought it up as a burnt offering in his son's stead. And the idea of getting tangled in your horns is an imagery that always was interesting to me. Why specifically is the ram described as getting its horns tangled? You know, there's plenty of ways to catch a ram. Obviously, this was very convenient for Avraham that he found a ram that was stuck, because otherwise you'd have to run after it. It's not like the ram is going to volunteer to be slaughtered, but is there more to it than that? I want to quote for you two secular midrashim today. What I mean by a secular midrash is sort of like one of these fables that I think we can learn from. The first one is an Aesop's fable, and it goes like this. A stag drinking at a clear pool admired the handsome look of his spreading antlers, but was much displeased at the slim and ungainly appearance of his legs. What a glorious pair of branching horns, said he. How gracefully they hang over my forehead. What an agreeable air they give my face. But as far as my spindle shanks of legs, I am heartily ashamed of them. The words were scarcely out of his mouth when he saw some huntsmen and a pack of hounds making towards him. His despised legs soon placed him at a distance from his followers, but on entering the forest, his horns got entangled at every turn, so that the dogs soon reached him and made an end of him. Mistaken fool that I was, he exclaimed. Had it not been for these wretched horns, my legs would have saved my life. So I don't think that this was a commentary on the story of the Akedah. However, you take wisdom from wherever it comes. If we can use the lesson from this story, it's not just the deer, the stag that takes pride in its antlers. It's the ram who takes pride in its horns, because the ram's strength, ram tough, you know, the whole image of a ram is ramming into another ram or another person with its strong horns. And sometimes the message could be is that what we feel is our most powerful feature and what gives us, what is the source of our strength, really could be the cause of our downfall or the cause of our failure. And I'm just wondering if this was part of the lesson to Avram in the story of the Akedah. And I want to trace it for you as follows. You know, the Torah starts off the story of the Akedah as follows. Vayihi achar hadivarim ha'ela v'ha'elokim nisat Avraham. Source number 3. It was after these things occurred that God tested Avraham. Now the rabbis debate what events actually occurred. Why does the Torah have to say it was after these events that God decided to test Avraham? Which events are you referring to? And is there, in that phrase, doesn't that in itself imply that there's some connection to what had happened previously. In other words, there's a reason why I'm testing you, Avraham, and it has to do with the events that happened previously. So what happened previously? Our sages debate this. One of the things they say is that it was Achar Devarav Shel Yishmael. Yishmael ended up having a dialogue with Yitzchak as to which one was prepared to do more for God, and as a result of that, God tested and told Avram to bind Yitzchak. There's another version of the Medrash, Acharei Bo'o Me'eretz Plishtim L'Chevron, that it was after Avraham came from the Philistine land and went to Hebron and lived there for a few years. And I'm not sure whether Chazal are actually alluding to what I'm about to say to you, but I'm going to take my cue from these very few words of our sages and suggest to you that there were two events that we also read about in Rosh HaShana that provide us perhaps with the source of what Achar HaDevarim Ha'ela means, after these things happened. The first story that we're going to read about on Rosh Hashanah is the birth of Yitzchak. Really a joyous occasion, a miraculous occasion, and the reason why we read about it is because we know that God answered Sarah's prayers on Rosh Hashanah, just like he answered Chana's prayers, and other barren women, their prayers were answered on Rosh Hashanah. So one of the reasons why we read about the birth of Yitzchak is to show that Rosh Hashanah is a time when people's judgment can change, their mazel can change, and miracles can happen. But as part of that story, we read about a dark sort of underbelly of that story, which was that Vateres Sarah et ben Hagar hamitzrit asher yalada leAvraham mitzachek, that Sarah sees the son of Hagar, who is Yishmael. He's playing around. Rashi says he was a bad influence on Yitzchak. He was shooting arrows and perhaps worshiping idols and being a mischievous child. And Sarah felt that this was very, very bad. And therefore, Vatomer la'Avraham garesh ha'ama hazot ve'et bena, ki lo yirash ben ha'ama hazot im beni im Yitzchak. And Sarah says to Avraham, you have to evict Hagar and Yishmael from the house. I don't want them living with us anymore. Send them away. Something which, at first glance, seems to be very cruel. Get rid of them. There are actually some commentaries who suggest, the Ramban himself says this, that there could have been another solution. They could have found a way to coexist, but Sarah put her foot down, and because of that cruelty, the Jews have been suffering from the children of Yishmael to this day. But that's not the simple understanding of the verse. Simple understanding of the verse is, Sarah says, this is not good, you must send them away, and the Torah says, Vayera hadavar ma'od beinei Avraham alodot beno. This pained Avraham greatly about this conflict that was going on about his son. It's not clear whether the conflict over his son is a reference to Yitzchak or whether it's a reference to Yishmael. But the point is that it would upset him that I have to choose between one son over the other. And this was very painful for Avraham. What does Hashem tell him? I know it's hard for you. This is a very difficult thing for you to do, but kol asher tomar elecha Sarah, shema bekola. Nevertheless, anything that Sarah tells you, you have to listen to her. Ki v'Yitzchak yikarei lecha zara. Because Yitzchak is your chosen progeny. He is going to be the perpetuator of your family line. And as far as Yishmael, I'll take care of him, don't worry. In other words, he's not going to become a schlepper. He won't be cast away. I will give him a sense of permanence, separate and apart from the Jewish people. And once Avraham hears that from Hashem, he sends Hagar and Yishmael away, and we know the rest of the story. And they encounter their own miracle with an angel in the desert. Yes? That's story number one, which I think is the precursor to the Akedah. Story number two is also something that we read as a precursor to the Akedah, also on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, which is the peace treaty that Avraham makes with Avimelech. Avimelech is the king of the Philistines. And Avraham at one point in his life is living in Philistine territory. And Vayihi BAYT Vayomer Avimelech Ufichol Sartz Va'oel Avraham Lemor Elokim Imecha B'chol Asher Ata Oseh. Avimelech comes to visit Avram and he says, God is with you in everything that you do. We can see that clearly now, even though we were not very hospitable to you in the past and we basically told you to get lost. But Ve'ata hishavali ve'elokim heina im tishkor li ulenini ulenechdi. Kachesed asher asiti imacha ta'aseh imadi ve'im aretz asher garta ba. Avram, you used to live in my territory. I know that I sent you away. I know that I was not very kind to you when I took your wife into my palace with the intention of matrimony. And I was very threatening to you. But I want you to make a peace treaty with me. In exchange of what? In exchange for the kindness that I showed you when I let you live in amongst the Philistines. Of course, with friends like that, who needs enemies, right? But this was what Avimelech comes to Avram with. He says, I have a proposal for you. I see that you are blessed by God, that you're a man of God. I'm not interested in angering your God, so let's make a treaty so that you, as you are continuously growing, you will not harm me. Vayomer Avraham Anochi Yishaveh. And Avraham says, okay, you have a deal. I will make the covenant with you. I will make a treaty. But Avraham, at the same time, remonstrated. He reproached Avimelech. He said, why is it that I dug wells in Philistine land that was my right to do, and your servants stole the wells from me? All of that hard work was taken away from me. And Avimelech said, Lo yadati mi asat hadavar hazeh, v'gam ata lo higadata li v'gam anochi lo shamati bilti hayom. Number one, I don't know who did it. Number two, I never knew about this until today when you just told me. So what do you want from me? Now Avimelech, if he really wanted to rectify the problem, should have said to him, we're going to do an inquiry, we're going to try and get to the bottom of this, and we're going to compensate you for your stolen wells. But he didn't say that. He basically says, it's not my fault, not my problem, you never told me about it, nothing I can do about it. Basically, like when you encounter other government people, he's the ultimate government person, but he's at the top of the chain. When the guy at the top of the chain says there's nothing I can do about it, then there's nowhere else you can go. But anyway, Vayikach Avraham tzonu vakar vayitem la'Avimelech vayichretu shneihem brit. Avraham says, okay, he takes some animals, uses them as an exchange for the covenant. They seal the deal, and Avraham says, we from now on have a peace treaty. I promise you that myself and my children will not harm the Philistines. And this is quite interesting because Avraham here is basically also displaying the type of character that he displayed previously. He's extremely sensitive, he's very kind, he's a Baal Chesed, and just like it was very painful to him not to send away Hagar and Yishmael, it really genuinely pained him until Hashem said, this is something you got to do. So he said, well, if God tells me, I got to do it. And over here also, I think we're seeing a side of Avraham that we're not particularly, on the one hand, it shows that he's a very kind man. He's not interested in getting into tussles with people. He steps away from the fight. And we know people like that. It's a very virtuous kind of attitude sometimes to be able to say, it's not worth the fight. You want a peace treaty? Fine. It's only money. I dug the wells. Your people stole it from me. You really should be doing something about it. No, you're not willing to do anything about it. Here, take my animals. We'll make a peace treaty. He doesn't put up a fight at all. And there's a certain softness to Avram that we all readily associate with and makes us who we are today. The Jewish people are Baishanim, Rachmanim, and Gomlei Chasadim. We have a sense of shame. We are merciful, and we are bestowers of kindness. We get all of that from Avram Avinu. But at the same time, there is an importance that needs to be placed on, you got to be tough when it's time to be tough. If you're a member of the Shin Bet, or you're a colonel in the IDF, it's not going to fly when you're fighting Hezbollah or Hamas to say, I know you want to kill me, I'll step out of your way. We don't do that. We can't afford to do that. And there needs to be something embedded within the Jewish people that allows us to, when it's necessary, to put our foot down. And I believe that this was the calling of the Akedah. The calling of the Akedah was to Avram to say why it's the last of the 10 trials, or according to some, it's the last of the 10 trials, is that Avraham, it's this task that I'm asking you to do requires tremendous cruelty, requires tremendous sacrifice, and to go completely against the grain of whom you are. And it's not just, and I don't want you just to do it because I'm telling you you must do this. I want you to feel that part of the service of Hashem is to do things that are cruel. And sometimes you need to do that which is cruel in order to do the right thing. That was part of the test. That, to me, is why the ram when the ram is found, it is found with its horns stuck in the thicket. It's got tangled horns. What essentially is happening over here is that what the lesson that Avram is being taught is you thought that your greatest asset in life was you're just a big cuddly softy. And you love everyone and you're willing to you're willing to forgive the whole world for any offense that is made against you. And that's the most virtuous thing. But what you have to also understand is that that's what got you stuck. You got stuck in your life because of that. And we need to release you from that personality burden that you've been carrying to be that person who always steps out of the way. Because sometimes in life you can't just step aside. You have to stand up to the adversary. You have to be willing to fight for what's important in life. Even if it means making enemies, even if it means doing things which you may later regret because it's just not your nature. But the true Eved Hashem has to set aside my own preconceived notions of what is, my personality, my tendencies, all the things that I thought that I had to do, which are the right thing to do. And also realize that sometimes what I think is my greatest asset may also be my greatest liability. My antlers get me stuck sometimes in life. And sometimes what's needed is to run with my swift legs instead of admiring the antlers of life. And the truth of the matter is that's the way our sages, that's the way they describe, the way that God makes people. Sometimes life gets very, very complicated, and we're not sure why we're put in certain situations that we are. The shofar is also that reminder as well. If you take a look at source number 8, there's a statement from the Jerusalem Talmud that says as follows: Amar lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God said to Avraham, Avraham, kach atidin banecha. In the future, the same thing that happened to the ram will happen to your children. Ne'echazim ba'avonot, umistabchim b'malchiyot mibavel lemadai, mimadai liyavan, umiyavan le'edom. Your children are going to get tangled in life. They'll get tangled in their sins. They'll get tangled in the diaspora, going from one kingdom to another, from one country to another. Amar lefanav ribon ha'olamim yikein la'olam. So Avram questions God. He says, is this going to be our perpetual fate? That forever this is going to be our fate, to constantly get stuck, our horns getting entangled? Amar lei v'sofan lihigael bikranav shel ayil hazeh. And God says, no. Eventually your redemption will come through those very same horns. As it says, Vashem Elokim bashofar yitka v'halach b'sa'arot teiman. As it says that God will use the horn of a ram to bring the redemption. So part of that is that, yes, God says, I appreciate the fact that in many instances you got tangled with your previous persona, the parts of your personality that you thought were your strong parts, but really weren't in a particular situation. But I will take that into account as well. and the thing that you got entangled with, the greatness of your personality, I'll also use it for the redemption as well. So yes, it's true, there are certain times when you get entangled by those goodness, by that excessive goodness, but I'll also take that into account to bring you redemption as well. Life is like that too. When we find ourselves stuck and entangled, we sometimes think, how do you get untangled? If you're tangled into something. You ever get something tangled into a knot and a bunch of string? Usually an animal like a ram or a stag is not smart enough to disentangle itself. It just jerks back and it pulls and pulls and pulls and only makes things worse because you can't disentangle yourself by brute force, by pulling and pulling. The animal pulls itself until it starves itself and gets exhausted and just dies from that. But the way to disentangle yourself is we sometimes think that we have to pull violently, when in reality all we need to do is move gently in the opposite direction and everything will be resolved. That's also part of the solution to remove yourself from entanglement. Those parts of our personality which we think is our greatest asset, which gets us tangled to begin with, don't use those horns to try and disentangle yourself. That's not going to help. It's only going to get you more frustrated and exhausted. But you just have to make slight adjustments in your movement in life in order to disentangle. The Jewish people are compared to a bird in the Medrash, but this, I'm going to conclude. Before I do that, let me just do this other Medrash, which gives that similar idea. Mahu achar ne'echaz basevach. The Medrash says, what does it mean that the Jewish people are entangled, or the ram is entangled in the brush? Amar lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu, re'ei ma lefanecha. Hashem says to Avram, I want you to look into the future of your people. Banecha homdim acharecha kisheyu mesubachim v'ne'echazim ba'averot maheim osim b'karnav. When your children are going to be entangled in sin, they're going to feel that they're stuck in life. What are they going to do with those horns? The horns of the ram. Notlim et hakarnot ha'elu v'tokim bahem. They're going to blow those horns. V'ani nizkar akedosh al Yitzchak u'mezakeh otam badin. And I'll remember Akedas Yitzchak and I'll bring them merit. But it's specifically the entangled horns that Hashem says, I'll remember. In other words, Avraham, this was your trial to disentangle yourself from your horns. And you passed that test. And when the Jewish people learn that you need a multiple set of skills, you can't just rely on one particular personality trait in order to be an Eved Hashem, that's what will bring them the greatest merit. That the Jewish people are willing to do whatever needs to be done in order to preserve our people and to become God's people throughout history. So I mentioned that there's a medrash that compares the Jewish people to a bird, but that's not this story. This story you can append to that medrash, but again, it's an anonymous source. It's a secular story. When God first created the bird, he created it without wings. The bird complained, how do you expect me to get around with these tiny little feet? God then adds this heavy burden on its back. What's this? Asked the bird. They're called wings, says God. What? What an additional burden. God just says, spread your wings and fly. And our potentials are endless if we believe in ourselves and are willing to change the assumptions about ourselves, about who we are and who we must be. A lot of times, what Hashem is telling us when we get entangled in the things that we do get entangled with in relationships and in other situations in life because of our personality issues, God is just saying, I put you in that place because I want you to disentangle yourself. I know that you can do that. I know that you have a way of maneuvering. I'm giving you those wings. You've got the wings. Don't think that it's a burden. You can just spread your wings. So those are some of the ideas that I think that we should be thinking about on Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah is a time when we can make a clean break from the previous year, when we can disentangle ourselves from the things that have held us down for so long, and when we can really declare ourselves before Hashem as his servants who are really ready to undergo transformations and to be able to go beyond just what we think we are and really become better and new creations before Hashem. Comments, questions? I wish you all a ksiva v'chasima tova, good gebenched year.